Welcome to what is both the first Visiting Writers Series event put on by the MFA program in creative writing in the English department, and also one of a series of events in the Art Sustainability Activism Initiative for the year. I have to say a few words to kick us off here. And you also have to picture me not only as myself saying a few words, but also as Noy Holland. So she sent me a little text. She's one of the principals in the Art Sustainability Activism Initiative. She unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. So I'm speaking for both of us. The Art Sustainability Activism Initiative, the ASA, is a collective effort in an era of discord and division. The series brings the MFA for Poets and Writers, the School of Earth and Sustainability, and the Fine Arts Center into shared orbit. Together, ASA has hosted visual artists, performance artists, writers, poets, scientists, and activists. ASA brings the fisheries biologist into the room with the composer, the geoscientist into the room with the poet. The ASA started 4 years ago with a live performance by the Philip Glass Ensemble of the score to Koyaanisqatsi, and has since featured luminaries such as Miwa Matreyek, Amitav Ghosh, the performance group Small Island, Big Song, and others. ASA seeks to elevate awareness, reckon with climate grief, and precipitate positive change. Tonight, as I said, marks the first confluence of the Visiting Writers Series and the Art Sustainability Activism Initiative, and the first of many events in the Archives of the Future, ASA's 2022-23 series. Visit the Fine Arts Center website for more information. ASA has a symbiotic relationship with the cutting-edge interdisciplinary journal Paperbark, which Nat Herald will sell following tonight's reading. Tonight's reading being both a celebration of an exciting, vibrant poet's new work, and also a welcome to that same poet. Our reader tonight, Abigail Chabitnoy, has joined us this year as a new tenure-track faculty member in poetry, teaching in the MFA, as well as in the 5-college Native American Indigenous Studies program, where she is part of a group of faculty hired consortium-wide recently on a Mellon Foundation grant to transform how Native American and Indigenous studies is approached. Welcome, Abby, to UMass and to the MFA, and to this exciting new collaboration. Indeed, indeed. Before I turn it over to Peter Gizzi to introduce Abby, I want to remind us all that the University of Massachusetts Amherst was founded and built on the unceded homelands of the Pocumtuck Nation on the land of the Norwottuck community. We begin with gratitude for nearby waters and lands. We recognize these lands and waters as important relations with which we are all interconnected and depend on to sustain life and well-being. The Pocumtuck had connections with these lands for millennia. Over 400 years of colonization, when Pocumtuck peoples were displaced, many joined their Algonquian relatives to the east, south, west, and north. That includes Mashpee and Aquinnah Wampanoag, Nipmuc, Narragansett, Mohegan, Pequot, Mohican communities, and Abenaki and other nations of the Wabanaki Confederacy. These Native people still maintain connections and relationships of care for these lands today. And we also acknowledge that the University of Massachusetts Amherst is a land-grant university. As part of the Morrill Land Grant Act portions of land from 82 Native nations west of the Mississippi were sold to provide the resources to found and build this university. We encourage you to learn more about the Native nations whose homelands UMass Amherst now resides upon, and the indigenous homelands on which you live and work. We also invite you to deepen your relationship to these living lands and waters. And now I introduce our esteemed poetry faculty member, Peter Gizzi, to introduce our newest poetry faculty member, Abby. Peter.
Hey everybody, thanks Jeff. I begin this kind of celebration. We're so lucky to have Abigail with us, and we're delighted. And I also want to welcome C.A. Conrad, who's our distinguished visiting poet in residence, who was recently given the Ruth Lilly Prize by the Poetry Foundation. So congratulations, C.A. What else can I say? Maybe I should say less. But it's hard to think back many years of what New England looked like when it was first growth forests. Massive deciduous trees as far as one could see. Do you know that 80% of New England was forested in the 19th century? It's kind of hard to believe, but truth. Sustainability, I don't have an answer for that. I think that the best we can do is to be good to one another and to do our work and to work hard and feel grateful for being and for the things we have. How the world changes, I don't know. But at any rate. But it is a true pleasure of mine to welcome everyone to the inaugural reading of the new year, and especially to welcome Abby, to the MFA program for poets and writers. Abigail is first and foremost a poet, and she thinks with a poet's strategies. Her work is vital and important. Writing about her celebrated first book, How to Dress a Fish, the judges of the prestigious International Griffin Prize had this to say, quote, "Bringing languagelessness into language. Abigail Chabitnoy's How to Dress a Fish is an act of re-mythologizing and personal recollection, or recollection, a text of redress to the violence of U.S. colonialism. Let the contronym cleave like swallowed fish that appear whole. Her poems assemble a narrative of displacement and emergence, of that which is half revived and half buried, to address instability and unify across divides. With gestures of archival investigation and assemblage, the poems move with undercurrent, sections, elision, and invention into voicings of self, land, story, and mythic place," end quote. Abigail practices a hybrid poetics, a seamless overlap of searing lyric passages with hard documentary truth. All her work is a result of an original negotiation of history, gender, family history, U.S. history, and indigenous histories that create a layered speech act and a new vocal fabric. She makes the act of writing difference dynamic as an act of discovery without worn tropes or cliche, but with adventure into new modes of expression that are constantly in a state of becoming. Therefore, the poem as an act of personhood. Her work illuminates the task of unearthing identity as a quest and not an argument or a fixed ontological position. In this way, we are invited along with the author to both learn and discover a new present, a lyric present that only the knottedness of a poem can allow. Or, as Abby has written, quote, "It's a very Western thing to try and pinpoint things into neat boxes and not to accept that it's messier than that. And I think one of poetry's greatest strengths as a form is how it can draw attention to that messiness," end quote, amen. We find in her stunning new book, in the current where drowning is beautiful, in the current where drowning is beautiful. It's a really cool title. It's got to slow it down. We find in her new book an astonishing lyric troubling of the perilousness of history, of governments, of gender, of persons, families, and shifting landscapes. The voice and technique in this book is an achievement, and the lines are etched and working at the highest level of lyric enunciation. To be clear, I am loving this book, even with its hard look at reality, or because of its hard look at reality. So many moments of truth like this passage, for example. Still, we are burying women with their mouths closed. Still, we are burying women with our mouths closed. Still, we are missing. Our distinguished alumna, the poet Lisa Olstein, has this is kind of cool, right? Lisa graduated here many years ago. She has intelligently characterized Abigail's new book in this way, quote, "This remarkable book undertakes a kind of geological exploration of the hidden in plain sight strata making up the world around us and our lives within it. Raspberries against graves, against glaciers, disappeared women alongside disappearing rivers, mythic transformations next to anonymous martyrdoms. Connecting it all are stories, the questions they ask and answer, what they reveal or obscure, and water as source of life and death, body of history and place where history's bodies are buried, manifestation of the cross currents that swirl through and around us, bellwether of what's to come." Chabitnoy invites us into a dazzling, urgent mode of inquiry in which poems, keen and liminal, epic and intimate, fierce and tender, are the conscious element depositing us wide awake on the shore of the precarious present we inherit and inhabit, end quote. Abby writes a poetry where difference is a dynamic futurity, where the language of identity can only be active, restless, and transformative. It's with sincere pride that we welcome Abigail Chabitnoy to our community.
Wow, now I gotta follow that. Koyana, thank you so much. Peter, thank you. Jeff, thank you to the entire community. It has been really wonderful to be welcomed here, to find ourselves here. It's really been terrific. Everyone has been incredibly supportive. I'm kind of waiting for the curtain to lift or the other shoe to drop. But really, it's been wonderful. Thank you. Yes, and welcome, CA. I'm so delighted that you're here as well. I'm so happy with the timing of my book coming out. Thank you, Amherst Books, also. Yeah, so there was a question in the student Q&A before this for new students, creative writing students, one word of advice. Read the back covers of books and read how smarter people talk about books. It's always really illuminating to get that language and wonderful. So thank you again, Peter. Yeah, I'm gonna have some notes, but I think I'm gonna actually talk less and read more after that Q&A. So just kind of dive into starting with how to dress a fish and move into In the Current Where Drowning is Beautiful. And if I'm feeling brave enough after Peter's kind introduction, I might read some new work. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, so my first How to Dress a Fish, I couldn't find my copy. I'm in the middle of moving, and I actually had to pull like this kind of storage copy out for tonight. So I'm going to read some poems that I don't usually get to read because I don't have any of my sticky notes that I normally have. But as Peter so graciously introduced, it's a work about recovering family history, pushing back against narratives of erasure, and searching for a mooring, a kind of sense of where it is I come from, which really the same description, I suppose, could apply to the second work as well, and to the newer work, this idea of negotiating relationships and ways of being in the world, ways of moving in the world, ways of being accountable and who we are accountable to. So yeah, with that, I am gonna move into some reading. And I think it's kind of, I don't know, serendipitous that because I didn't have my usual stickies, I kind of leaned into the history a little bit in light of the Mellon Grant's generous support and funding, and the NAIS and their incredible welcome as well. So hearing land grants, as problematic as they can be, it's also really nice to hear all of those nations named in this place, especially growing up in Pennsylvania with that kind of myth of complete erasure. It's really beautiful to, as a starting place. There's a lot more to do, but as a starting place. Family ghosts. Michael, I wrote you a story. I didn't know what you did, what we did, if I should dig you up, but it didn't feel right you should remain so far from the sea. It didn't feel right I couldn't see you. Is this the shape these things should take? Distance of articulation. When letters are lost, I think of you, Michael, alone, on a train and dressed as an ordinary parcel, an acceptable body, 15 years old, crossing the whole of America. My father, too, has always been drawn to trains. Did you make it to Carlisle with all your words? With your real voice, with all your teeth. 4,621 miles today if by land, not counting each wave between woods and the Fox Islands. 3,034 if a raven flies. I'd like to believe you flew. Raptors too, fish salmon. How do you think they got there, the fox? I'd like to believe you flew, and when your young boy wings tired over Pennsylvania, and there was no more salmon, they caught you and fed you and asked you for your name, and brought you home where there were others, and brought you home to listen. Elocution lessons. Grandfather is sitting in the kitchen with all conveniency in his cup. Mother says these things skip a generation. Q. Is it because Indian marries white girl, produces half-breed shortly after Indian dies? Because only half the blood can hide, only half the bones come clean? A. Where are you going with these? Figures from the CDC are inexact. They've been imprecise in their correlations, and there are a number of ways one might choose to articulate the shape, dependent on distance between tongue and how many teeth. I'm beginning to suspect their threats are crossed. Leading causes of death: heart disease, bad heart, cancer, unintentional injuries frequently following consumption of alcohol, followed by diabetes, chronic liver disease, higher rate of binge drinking, chronic lower respiratory disease, stroke, suicide, social, pneumonia, impaired judgment, kidney disease. This is all just speculation, of course. What constitutes a bad heart? What constitutes social consumption, intent, a threat, cause of death, traumatized? Q, are you trying to relate to me? Statistics are a soft science. Insert blood requirements here. Disregard. Not only in architecture, dress, and food did administrators and settlers try to maintain home standards, but also in generating the statistical information that was deemed necessary by the national government. Considerable energy goes into constructing suitable records that are, in the end, inadequate. Given enough time, these things can be redressed. A, yes, I am trying to relate to you. Which of my bones are yours? How about some extra ones for my back? My spine is prone to fracture. A body has needs to know limits. I think I've got the color down, except for my white-sexed parts, my mother parts. These are unresponsive. White is a nervous shade, don't you think? So easy to spoil. I've been wearing white since the wedding. There are some stains, as one might expect. Red and yellow, black and white. I am precious on my mother's side. It is our generation's turn. That is, it's my turn, but I don't feel the need. That is, I don't feel any real threat. Observations. Although health outcomes among AIs are improving, large disparities with other racial and ethnic groups in the United States remain. Many health-related problems are directly linked to high rates of substance use and abuse. One mustn't rush to find a cause until we know all the facts are known. It's just, the bones these scientists keep digging up remember where the blood escaped. Where was blood, in them we buried. I have inherited more skeletons than I can count, such a weary weight to conquer this mass. Q, statistically speaking, must I be old? Must I be traditional? Must I be fair? Fair-skinned, fair-haired, neatly squared. That means the right box on a demographic form. A, the question of blood lies outside the body, bodies. Guakuta silpianak, apta kikutchmi, natan apta akadut aludit. Can you put my apak on the line? That is, my great in regarding distance, apak on this line. It is important that I reach him, that I follow the right channels. A body, water will wash away. Return me transparent to the sea. On weekends, I can be found in museums trying to find the right face to wear in light of recovered records and evolving vocabulary. I am thinking a shark, but a shark, like any other predator, looks as much man as monster, the way these bodies are figured. Results. Grandfather is crying, great-grandfather is crying. Where are they going, the children, and when will they come back? It means we are people. Still, there's a chance, mother says, these things skip a generation. I think there's a reason I don't normally read that poem at readings. But I think it's also important right now when, if you're not aware, ICWA, the Indigenous Child Welfare Act, which was enacted to protect Native children and keep them in their communities and keep them in their traditional homelands and family structures as much as possible, is probably next on the chopping board with this court. And so it's, I think, important to remember that, yeah, some people were okay after Carlisle, and some people were not. So, yeah, that's maybe the only time I'll read that one aloud. Dream with shark. I was dreaming in the sea. I decided my family should be there. We all should be there. I reached my arms into the water, to my shoulders, and tried to hold the place in the sea we should be. When I felt a solid mass fill my arms, I pulled the head of a shark out of the water. I pulled the head out of the shark. Koniag with house. There was a house I needed to go. I needed a home to survive. to wait the fire. The flood where there were others with other bodies. There was earth in them, I dug. Speaking the dead with words, I dug my way back to survive the flood. Into the earth. I had to know what I didn't know. I didn't know what kind of monster was I, so I dug. You can't throw the fish back in the water and expect to swim. I dug out a rib and another's rib. Another. I dug deeper until I reached the bottom of this house. I reached the cellar where the center was cold, where I could hide, my body full of bodies. And I think I'll just read a couple more from this one. Yeah. Before there was a train, I built my home from perfumed skins and crooked bones, far from the rotting boat. They took the wrong shape. Sod, not ice, not body, not other. Niki. Ang luk niki mek paramok. By the time you read this, I will have forgotten how to say the house is covered with sod, or home. Part of me wishes it had sunk. It sank. It is sinking. Only ashrane shuut kachainek pekyu tartut. Sometimes people salvage some stuff. I wish I could say I was moving into some lighter material, but this is titled "In the Current We're Drowning" is beautiful. And starts right in on that idea of climate grief. Although I'm struck too by this idea of shared orbits. I think it's really fitting to be participating in the future archives and the kind of interdisciplinary work going on right now. It's largely how I'm thinking about poetry right now, with these ideas of shared orbits and recurring patterns. Yeah, and so pretty seamless transition. Just somebody asked me when I was writing the first book where all the women were in the story, and I didn't have an answer to that in that book, but this book is, I suppose, that answer. Signs you are standing at the end. 2/3 of the country is in drought. The waters have all gone walking. Nunachachaluni. When white peaks crested the rolling hills behind our house, I knew it was time. We understand since we are children. Waves break waves, travel waves, do the wave. Did the wave make it across the room? Did the people who started it move across the room? Cause of death, traumatized. Cause of death, bad heart. Cause of death, exposure. Take to the cold air, to want of sea ice, to warming air, to a landscape without trees, too many ribs, to the sea, to ghosts, to loss of stable earth to plant one's feet, one's seed, one's egg, one's tooth. I heard it was an accident. In the end, in the breakers, there was no boat when I heard it. I took my sister and some others out the back door. The calm was not, and the neatly kept lawn was not. The sleeper wave was not. Too many teeth I saw too late. The wave would not be dove under. It turned snow, wet and heaving, and we were already running. After a field, I could hear every dead thing. How do we behave in the field? They asked for a story, the ones we'd have to leave behind, swallowed by the hoary mouth. Never ignore what someone tells you in a dream, once the women said. You are trying to remember what someone said who is dead. Kuchyanga u shikamkim, lampach huashu. I will tell you a story hard to leave in good light. persistent dream of large bodies. And this poem is for Joan Kane, who is also an incredible poet, and if you aren't familiar with her work, you should be. This is for Joan and those she is called after. Navayok, how to tell you, last night we were on this ship together, and you were there to comfort me. But this morning I am afraid for you, black stealing over the waters. My lips are never not splitting. Tell me, are the wolves living along this shoreline any gentler than the Moscow water dog? Even the Przemyślniki let them go extinct. Have we ever not been readying for war in your lifetime? Already my family is calling me, the ones I don't know how to name. In the stories I learned as a girl, you are otherwise called after one who knows things. You are called after one who knows how to listen. She was given fire and earth. This ground we are on has a history of flooding. Does it follow we are drowning? Cut the breast out of a woman and she becomes a bird. Or was it her guts? She can fly, I mean, it's that simple, so the story goes. Girls go into the woods and return mothers, so we invent little men, irresistible magic. Have we ever not been readying for war? At any moment, the ship could sink, mothers go into the water, become forces to be reckoned. It can all fail tragically. The waters take and give us back our dead. We will have this ship, the water, contents we have found. Just wanted to leave a little bit of time if anyone did have any additional questions. So I think I'm just going to read a few more from this book and then one of the new ones. It's interesting, I had no intention of ever becoming a mother when I wrote this book. There's actually a poem imagining the daughter that I would never have, and I am now the mother of a 7-month-old daughter. It feels like 7 years. And it's interesting to read these poems now with that light and to see so much emphasis on motherhood and I guess my body just knew. So here is in the current where drowning is beautiful. White breaks first, waves green, then black, shining seas, ships sailing, not sailing, what is still, wanting wind. Used to be no man could go against, this weather too will pass. The wind, not a river. And if a puddle at the last gives way to desert, corked bottle, walled city, veiled woman, buried one, were you afraid? Karwach tunyuk. If air the conscious element, sometimes breath, sometimes bird. The last few days have been windy, but the current is strong, Nicafor, and it rains all the time. Tangirnaq atur tepet. There is a river of woe and a river to forget, and then there is the river that does not break by all the gods. Good to the last drop. And sometimes, if I were not a fish with teeth after all. Read this one since Lisa Olstein, which was such a delight. I actually had met her before I had any thoughts of being in Massachusetts either, and has also been a wonderful poet to know. Swell. We took the long way to pick raspberries and find the old grave, weathered crosses and men young from mining years, before the ground was thawed. Glaciers give their own warning. Ice on the margin cracks under our weight. the more distance between the mountains grew. It used to be the river, channeled the other side, but lately banks are breaking. The high ground isn't. Many areas have seen disappearances, glaciers and ice sheets and rivers short of the sea, the face never the same. Suppose somebody would have made the spotted feather into bedding. Isn't most of our armor against cold these days? I was thinking of a hat in need of a feather or two. Sharper, a mask when the man broke through the trees trying to be small. Am I predator or prey? He didn't see me. And that he is not a spirit is certain. That my coat is not thick enough to be still is apparent. The cold get under my skin. Not bear or fox. I've never seen a wolf in the wild. They found Ashley before I left. Before that, they found Olivia. With the necks of 200 birds, I could have made a garment capable of these surroundings. If good enough for the sea, the mothers would give them stories, stories, stories. The children would watch, listen, and learn. But there's the rope, the web with its 2 large holes. My family doesn't tell stories, so we must use the net. Kodiak atushach. 1, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 still waiting to be found. Amlertut numirat kalikami. Amlertut paniat kalikami. Amlertut alkat kalikami. Amlertut mamat kalikami. Amlertut achnat kalikami. Keep counting. The woman was full of rage. The woman was full of vengeance. The woman moved mountains and grew islands in the sea. The woman was beautiful, so beautiful. The cormorants decided to mate with her. They changed shapes and took turns breeding with the woman and flew away. And later, when the woman had birthed all the children, the cormorants carried them in their mouths like seed and sowed them all over the world. Does it follow each violent act bears fruit? I'm supposed to have astonishing heat in my blood, but I think it's all been let by now. Buildings are still dangerous to enter. Unsafe structures and openings may be present. The white dog's teeth left my coat whole, but the skin was broken underneath. Guard the slow heat from the wound. I want to tell you, too, it is beautiful. The walls here their own shade of green. Where the ice is thin, blue becomes its own north light. But human qualities are most evident in the lines we cut. The face falls, they don't grow back. These openings are old and unmaintained, maybe without breathable air. Do not attempt to go under. Do not attempt to go backwards. Keep counting. The melt deep and wilding. And I'm just gonna end on one new poem, I think. In this wonderful new time of 5 a.m. that I've just leaned into because why not? I'm always tired anyway. Maybe 2. Maybe 2. Everything exactly as it seems. I, with my gun, am a good mother. I cut my daughter's mouth on teeth in the oatmeal. I pay heavily for the meat I slip past her gums, so she will value the taste of blood and metal. We live in the country with our designer sheep and rescued dogs pace the fences we have made of the field. With a bird in my hand, trembling until faint, until not, I tell her stories of the sea, of her own violent arc. She must inherit and shape with her small hands to buoy the barrel. I suppose if I really wanted her to introduce new imagery into my work, I would not have named her so that her initials spell ARK, A-R-K, my little boat. And thank you all again. I also forgot to thank the Khan Institute, which is also supporting some of my research this year into themes of indigeneity. And so a lot of this work has really been spinning around, all to say this is my last poem, Koyana. Mothers know. I saw that I was buried by building or rust, ruin in our blood and dust, feather folds, all bone and dry. It should have weighed nothing. It weighed nothing, bereft of breath beneath the berm. It weighed nothing to the dead. Thank you. So Jeff or Francis, I don't know, somebody asked if I wanted Q&A, and I'm here for it if anyone has a question, but I don't want to keep anyone from the reception. I know there were quite a few really brilliant questions earlier with the classes, which was really wonderful. That sounds wonderful. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna.